All right, we're good to go.
Yeah, either that or I already foresee myself not getting this.
All right, good morning. Welcome to our first red team talk of the day. If you are here for the blue team talks, you're in the wrong room. But welcome everybody, glad to have you here. Our first speaker is Chris Truncer. Chris is one of the developers of the Veil framework. He's going to use, he works for the Varus Group. He's going to give us talk about Pentester++. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you. This is actually my first time down here at Augusta and at BSides, so it's kind of interesting. I really like it so far. It's been a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to the different talks today. So this talk is called Pentester++. It's kind of going to go over my journey from a sysadmin where I've had no development experience to the Veil developer where I still basically heavily rely on that guy right up there. He's also one of the other developers for the Veil framework. But I learned a lot, and in my opinion, development or being able to work on scripts and different tools is a major way to elevate your game as a pen tester and to be able to help carry out more effective tests. So I kind of want to stress that I think people really should get into doing some sort of development and scripting work. A little bit about myself. I am a team lead for various groups, Adaptive Threat Division. That's kind of our vulnerability analysis and pen test team. I am one of the Veil framework's co-developers along with that guy illustrator up there. And I'm also a security researcher when I can, and I'm not having fun with my kids. On a side note, if anyone's interested in doing research or any sort of pen testing work, come talk to me. So what is this talk about? I firmly believe, like I was just saying before, that scripting and development work is essential to performing tests. Everyone can run tools on assessments and get their feedback, but you're always going to encounter situations where they don't perform or like give you 100% coverage of what you're looking for. I think being able to write your own tool or modify an existing tool to carry out what you need is essential. It can really help you perform your assessment. I'm kind of go over. This talk's going to be a little case study driven on different scenarios that I've encountered when I've been on assessments. And I'm going to talk about the tools that I've either had to write or scripts that I've had to modify to help me meet whatever it is I was trying to do, fix whatever problem I had on the assessment. And finally, this is going to be largely Python-based, but it really is pretty easily transferable to whatever language that you would work best for you. So why does someone want to learn language? In my opinion, there's a ton of different reasons, but some basic different things that you can do are you can carry out boring, repetitive tasks that are going to suck to do manually all the time and write a script and get it done. It's going to make your life easier, and it's going to get some stupid stuff out of the way. You can perform actions against large data sets. So if you're given a giant XML file that you really don't want to manually go through, it's pretty easy to write, or I say I hate XML parsing, but you can go through XML files if you know what you're doing pretty easily and get out the data that you're looking for significantly faster than if you were trying to do so manually. It's a great learning opportunity to actually try to figure out and learn something new. It can be fun, and you get a sense of satisfaction once you actually complete whatever it is that you're trying to do to fix your problem. But finally, I think the coolest thing is you can make a computer do exactly what it is that you want to do. So if you want to have it perform, like go out and connect to a website, you can do that. If you want to have it operate at lower levels and intersect packets and maybe manipulate them in a certain way to do things, it will do that too. Anything that you want, like that computer to do, writing your tool or writing a script, you can make it do that. So what are some areas to start off with? There's 4 great languages, in my opinion, that people can look at to maybe get their initial foothold if you haven't really gotten into that yet. Ruby uses Python or Ruby or Bash or PowerShell. So everyone's kind of at least fiddled around with certain things. So in my opinion, I love Python. Python was the first thing that I started, or first language that I started off with. It was fairly easy for me to pick up. I thought that they had great documentation, which is really helpful to me, and because I need to look up everything. And there's some really interesting tools out there that are written in Python, such as Timtone's Recon NG. You also have SQLmat. A lot of tools are written in a variety of these languages, so I think it's great to use. Bash is another interesting one, obviously. If anyone here uses Linux, you're probably going to be in a Bash shell. Obviously, it's not 100% true, but it's going to be what is possible. You're very likely going to be in. It's easy to start off with scripting. You can just write a script using basic commands that you already run, and it's fairly easy to pick up. Ruby is another great one. Obviously, in the Pentester's toolkit, the biggest Ruby project that anyone probably uses right now is Metasploit. So being able to pick up Ruby as a language is interesting in itself, plus you can use that knowledge to actually write your own logic for maybe Metasploit. And finally, PowerShell is another awesome language. Not only does it have, you can obviously use it for sysadmin capabilities and try to help manage your domain or gather information on the domain. But there's also a variety of different offensive capabilities. Veil, PowerView, and PowerUp are used written in PowerShell to actually help perform and look at systems from a security standpoint. Another awesome tool is obviously PowerSploit. So that's another great reason to start looking at PowerShell as well. In my opinion, any of these languages are relatively easy to start off with and probably a good area for people to first start off if they want to get into it. Some basic intro to development tips, I think, is you want to start small. If you try to create an extremely complex project right from the start, like you're going to hate life. It's going to suck. It's going to take too long. It's probably going to be complex. Start small. Figure out tasks that you commonly perform or problems that you constantly run into, and maybe use that as an area that you want to start off. So let's say you need help identifying different systems that have a certain name within their hosting or something like that. You can probably easily write a script to try to enumerate hostings across an IP space. Something like that where it's a small task but easy to do and not extremely complex is a great area to start off. Pick a language that you're interested in. If you pick one just because someone else tells you to, you're not going to be as interested in it. It may not fit towards like your domain area that you're working in. Such as, obviously, you're not going to be running Bash on Windows systems. So you want to pick something you're interested in and whatever fits exactly, kind of like to what environment you're operating in. Google and Stack Overflow are going to be your best friends. You're going to see throughout this talk, probably the first step that I took for every single script or tool that I've ever tried to write. It's going to help at least push you in the right direction. So it's something you really want to get into and start looking at first. And then finally, just dive into it. You want to try to actually force yourself to write it out. Make yourself have like an hour a day or an hour a evening to work on whatever it is that you're looking for. And then that'll give you that much closer to actually completing your task and like fixing whatever problem you started trying to fix. So that's kind of the beginning intro tips. I'm sure everyone has a ton of different ones. But my personal development philosophy outside of that is I like to try to create a proof of concept script that meets my goal at first. So I'm not trying to make anything pretty. I'm just trying to figure out, can I actually do this in whatever language that I'm working in? I'm going to hard code values into a script. It's not going to be easily usable, but I want to know that it works. After I've actually found my proof of concept script, the next step that I think people should try to do is clean up your code and comment it. It's really going to help when you go through and start looking at your code later and you try to expand upon it and make it easier for other people to use, or maybe also expand upon it right for it, if they actually know what you're doing. I can't tell you, Will and myself have actually probably looked at parts of the Veil framework a while ago, and we have no idea what this line does. It's interesting. So we try to comment everything, and it's really going to help save you some time later on if you do as well. The next step is you want to make your script or your tool usable by someone other than yourself. If I may know how to run a script, but if I hand it to my manager Jason, who needs a little bit of help with technical stuff, then it's going to be a little bit harder for him to try to figure out how to use it. So you want to try to figure out, how can I actually make this easy for other people besides myself who wrote it to actually use it. The next thing is you probably want to make some, if you can, make your script or tool publicly available. The InfoSec community is a pretty small community, and a lot of people try to help each other. Like, I mean, everyone here is probably using tools written by people other than themselves that have been freely released for anyone to use. It's really nice because it's like information is like a commodity that people are providing for each other, and it kind of just helps everyone do their job and hopefully make everything like a little bit more secure. And finally, maintain it. Interacting with users is always interesting, but you want to maintain your code, so they're going to give you some really good feedback. Sometimes you're going to encounter bugs that you never thought of. It's a weird edge case people did. They're going to give you ideas for certain features that you never would have thought of that really helps and can make your script or tool better. This is a great picture because you pretty much want to do exactly this. You want to code like some crazy psychopath who knows where you live, and they're the one that's in charge of maintaining it. So, where did I start? I really didn't have, so like I said, I came from a sysadmin background, didn't really have development. I wasn't a CS major, and so I didn't have that scripting knowledge, really, if you will, or really any sort of development knowledge. And I'm a Nova hacker, and on our Nova hacker mailing list, some people actually came out with requesting for pen testers and red teamers to help carry out a practice CCDC event. And so they wanted us to basically just volunteer time, go on site, and then just act as the CCDC red team. And so I was like, I volunteered for that, but I thought it'd be really cool and just something to do on the weekend. I talked with Rob Fuller, who's actually on the national CCDC team, for some pointers, because I'd never been involved in CCDC at this point. And he gave some really interesting stuff, such as you want to get scripts ready to go and ready to fire, basically right from the get-go. Some of these things that you want to do is maybe just have the most commonly used exploits that are still built into systems, like 08067 or anything like that. It's very basic. Because the faster you can get it off right from the start, the more likely it is that you're going to actually leave your shell or something coming back. So at this point, I started working to try to build scripts that would help us out and get us prepared for, or at least myself prepared for when we were actually doing the practice event. Another commonly used tool that's on CCDCs and when we actually go on pen test is Armitage or Cobalt Strike. Within Armitage and Cobalt Strike, Raphael built this awesome language called Cortana. And Cortana was a cyber fast track project that he worked on, I believe it was like 2 years ago when it released. And it's this really awesome event-driven language. So I don't know if anyone here has had like IRC bot wars or like created like IRC scripts. It's really similar to that, where on an event you can make it do something. So this is another interesting area of this and like Metasploit resource scripts that I can use to just automatically send stuff off to actually start honing blue teamers. So I kind of tried to break everything down like a problem, goal, or solution if I can. And at this point, my problem that I knew I was going to run into, that I was told about ahead of time, are blue teamers for CCDC constantly change passwords. So I wanted to figure out how to create a script that automatically grabs system hashes at maybe an attacker or myself defined interval and just constantly keep running, constantly get passwords and hashes in case they keep changing them. So my solution for doing that was to create a Cortana script. So you want to start small when you're writing scripts. And in this case, I want to figure out, okay, what am I actually going to need to do to perform these constantly dump hashes? So I know I'm going to need to get system privileges. I'm going to need to be able to figure out how am I actually going to dump hashes on the system. And I need to figure out how to do this at a set interval. At this point, I knew how to do none of this. I had never worked with Cortana at any point, and so this was all kind of going to be cool. So Rappi actually has an awesome GitHub repo, which is linked here. I'll release these slides later so everyone can see them, that contains a ton of different Cortana scripts. Seeing as I had no idea what I was doing, this was my first place that I actually wanted to go to. And I realized that not everyone's probably going to be able to read this, so I'll try to just get the gist of what it is. This top screenshot here actually lets me know, okay, there's an event that's out there called session. So whenever like a pen tester receives a session, that's like your first compromise of that machine. So I'm able to figure out when I, as a pen tester, receive a session, there's a check that I can run is, hey, is this session actually like Windows Interpreter? Awesome, okay, if it is, then I also was then able to figure out, hey, I can run certain commands on here. Like, I can figure out what level of privileges that I have on that box. I can then tell it to try to get system on that box. I can then check my privilege again real quick to make sure that I'm system. And then I can also actually hash them from that box. So literally from this single picture, I was able to figure, or a single script, I was able to figure out how to check if I actually do receive a session. Then once I hit that event, is that Windows Interpreter? And if it is, then, okay, let's start running a command. This next screenshot down here below actually, so there's this command called heartbeat of 30 seconds. So what this actually does is every 30 seconds, it'll run whatever I'm telling it to run underneath that. So that's awesome because I've probably figured out really close actually how to do what it is I'm looking to do. I figured out how to check if I have a session coming back, if it's Windows Interpreter, and actually then get system, dump hashes, and then do it every so often. And that's kind of, I just looked for a few more examples on how other people were doing it. And I can check right here. So this is there's more than just like 30 seconds or 60 seconds. I can do it every minute. I can do it every 10 seconds, and so forth. And then finally, here's also another way of how you can run like a Metasploit post module, such as hash dumping or persistence in this case. So I had a pretty good idea of what I was going to be doing. I knew that there were a couple sample scripts out there, and I tried to basically just combine it all into one. Again, I know this may be a little bit hard to read, but so what I just did is exactly that. Is if a session opens, I check, or first check for a session. When that session opens, check if it's actually Windows Interpreter. Assuming that it is, then try to get system privileges. Then once I get system, dump some hashes. So it's awesome. I've got that first part done, but I still need to do it every so often. I then figured out, okay, we can use that on heartbeat command that we saw earlier, and then for every 15 seconds, do that same thing. Just, or not get system, but actually go through dump hashes, and it actually performs that, and it's worked. So it's really interesting to me because I got my feet wet in a language or a scripting language that I've never worked in before. I met the goals that I had outlined where I figured out how to obtain system privileges, how to actually dump hashes, and how to do it every so often. And I also made life a little bit harder for CCDC boot series. So it was fun, and it was a quick thing. This probably took maybe 30 minutes to about an hour just trying to figure out how other sample scripts are using it or doing this out there, and then adapting it to my use. This is a great way to first get a quick win when you're trying to write a script, is pick something super small that you can base off of other example scripts out there, and then just repackage it and make it easier to perform what you need to do. So that was awesome. I got my first tiny script done, but I knew I wanted to learn a little bit of Python because I probably knew about 10 lines of it and used basic functions, and that was more than any other language that I knew out there at the time. So I decided to give a shot at Python. With that said, I think when you try to work to write something from scratch, again, you kind of want to go back to the philosophy of trying to find a minor problem that exists at work. Let's say you commonly are given a ton of XML data or like tool results, and you want to put it into an Excel file. Well, it's going to suck if you have to do that manually against a large set of data. But if you can do something small like that, or relatively small, and figure out how to automatically script creating that into an Excel document, it's going to make life easier. The next thing that is also important though when writing this is you want to figure out, kind of like what I just did, outline exactly what you need to do. So like in the previous case, get system, dump hashes, do it every so often. You need to kind of figure that out for your problem. And then finally, pick the language of your choice. So, but this is also important that you're going to need to somewhat recognize like the environment that you're going to be operating in. So if you're in a Linux environment, you're not going to typically be running PowerShell, obviously. At this point, this is kind of like the FNG phase of your development period, which sucks. It's not a lot of fun, but you need to learn some of the basics of whatever language that you're operating in. So at this point, you kind of need to figure out how to write your first like hello world script, just in whatever languages that you're operating in. You want to learn some like basic data types like, hey, this is a string. Okay, this is an integer. I can do math with integers and not strings. You want to figure out how to do certain basic things such as math, concatenate strings, how to create a function, how to loop through stuff multiple times, etc. And when you do this, you're going to learn the syntax of your language also. It's really going to help to start trying to figure out, okay, Python does this one way, Ruby does this a different way, Bash and PowerShell do it in their own different ways as well. So it's going to help you get that initial syntax and at least a quick understanding of maybe what language you're operating in does. So at this point, I was on multiple assessments, and we realized that a lot of people, probably one of the fastest ways to check a hash that maybe we had a hash and we had a guess of what the plaintext password is. In order to check and see if they match up, people submit this stuff online as a major OPSEC fail. Like your customers are going to be pissed if they're going to find out that you're submitting the password hashes online. So that was our main problem I encountered. My goal at this point was to try to create a script that's like super easy and super basic, but generates hashes right on my box. And also I can then compare hash with the plain text string that I think it is and check and make sure and see if they match up. If they do, awesome. If not, at least I know. So my solution at this point was Hasher, which is a totally awesome name. So the first thing that I did when actually trying to do this is I went to Google. And Google is my best friend and it pointed me right to Python, their documentation, and Stack Overflow. And there's this, library called hashlit there that actually does exactly what I needed it to do. So in this case, like you can kind of see, I'm just importing this library. I'm telling it, hey, I want to create an MD5 hash. So that's going to be pretty simple. I then give it the plain text string, which in this case is a lot of API junk data, or you can put JSON frank or whatever it is that you want inside of it. And then just output the hash, and I have exactly that. So I have my proof of concept script essentially right here. Like it's not easily usable, but I know it works. So that was my first step that's really important to make sure that you're not wasting your time when trying to do something. So at this point, I kind of figured out the basic functionality of how to do what it is that I'm looking to do. The next step that I wanted to do though was to try to figure out, okay, how can I make this usable by others, not just myself? So one way to do it is I can add a basic menu structure where, hey, what do you want to do? You want to generate a hash or compare a hash with a plain text string. Okay, so you do make a choice. I also wanted to generate functions that would, that would be what's picked in the menu. I also wanted to give the ability to generate multiple different hash types. And so you can pick that from the menu. But also one of the biggest things that you need to do when doing this is prepare for users in their usability, or in what they're going to do. And people out there, your users, are going to figure out how to crash your script and how to make it break in ways that you've never imagined, you've never thought of. It's going to happen. It's amazing how people use stuff. So one thing that you're going to end up doing and probably seeing is error checking within your code is going to be probably half of your code. Like that proof of concept script right there is probably 4 lines, but it's probably going to be like 20 or 50 to actually check, hey, are they actually giving me like a valid menu option? If I have 1 through 10 and they give me a letter Q, like I need to catch that. You don't want a user to be able to crash your script or your program, especially if this is something that you're going to be publicly releasing, because in my opinion, the lack of usability or making sure that it actually does what you want it to do is going to be the death of a project. Because if I'm on an assessment and I need something and it doesn't work, I'm not going to rely on that in the future. So I kind of look at this, look at how as an attacker, like, could I use this script? Like, what would make things easier for me? And so one of the things was adding command line arguments, because I didn't want to have to go through a giant menu every single time just to generate a single hash or compare them. Doing so makes it easy to actually just quickly use whatever your program is, and then people can script up your tool and make it run really fast and do it, perform whatever your tool is supposed to do over a large set of data within a short period of time, which is having to go through and spend 10 minutes operating for the menu or going through the menu. So at this point, I want to figure out, okay, how can I add command line arguments to this? So I go right back to Google, and Google takes me right back to Python's documentation. There's this library out there called hardparse. It makes life really easy, where you can really easily define basically like your command line options. So I figured out, hey, I can actually give it like, tell it to either generate a hash or compare a hash. And I can do that all through that command, or figure that out based off the commands that the user is actually setting. And so this is kind of like a quick example script that I found where it was actually right on the documentation for doing that. But and so by figuring out and like just looking at this, it's fairly easy to like look at, where you just give it the name, you give it a description, and then when a user runs like -h, they don't know what your tool does. It gives a really easy to use menu and prints it out for people to look at. And so this is what I did. I basically took this sample code that was there and just changed it to, instead of the add, just like generate. And then I gave another option for like hash type, where people could add like MD5. And then one more final option for like plain text string. And so then the person would enter their generate, they would have hash type of like MD5, and then the string is like, I'm here, and it'll pop out your actual MD5 hash. So at that point, I figured out how to add command lines to the tool, and I did so, and it was actually really simple to do. It actually then can support multiple hash types, because when looking further into hashlit, it was just as simple as changing MD5 to SHA-1, but I can get a SHA-1 hash now. So it's super simple to do, and their documentation made it really easy for me to look at and figure out how to do it. I also then had added the ability to not only generate the hash, but then actually compare the plain text hash, or plain text string with the hash itself. And one thing that I thought was important was I was not actually trying to crack hashes. I'm not trying to beat hashcat out there, because that would be a losing battle. But what I want to do is just a quick, like I said, simple way to actually just do this all locally on my machine, and it works. At this point, though, one thing that is really important, which I'll hit on later, I realized that I needed to use version control. In my case, I use Git. I typically put everything that I have on GitHub. I highly recommend, if you're going to be getting into scripting or development, use some sort of version control. There's like Git, there's Subversion, there's CVS, there's Microsoft, like Visual Source Safe, I don't even know. There's a ton of other different like options that are out there for you to use. Pick one of them and use it. Because I guarantee you, I speak from experience, you will mess up your code, you will delete your tools and your scripts, and you will be thankful for actually having your code checked in somewhere. I can't tell you the number of times that guy has yelled at me because I deleted branches of Veil code, and it was terrible. Like, he got pissed, and rightfully so, and it probably took like 2 hours to figure stuff out. You will be thankful for using this, do it. It's going to save you time. Okay, right now. Alright, so at that point, I had like my kind of semi basic tool done, like hasher. It was just super basic, and but I wanted to figure out, okay, how can I do something a little bit more like complex? I've got this like basic understanding of the language. Now I wanted to tackle something a little bit more interesting. At this point, I kind of got into eyewitness. So one thing on Pentest, people out there, when you go on Pentest, you're going to be given a large like set of data out there, or like IP range. Within that, there's probably going to be tons of different web servers, whether that's printers or web applications, whatever it is, OWA, who knows. So we needed a way to generate, or to figure out what all the different web servers that are out there, and how to quickly go to it. Tim Tome back there actually was kind of my inspiration for when I first started this, because he wrote the tool Peeping Tom, which is awesome. And that was what got me first started, because I didn't know if you could necessarily do that in Python. And at that point, he created basically an obvious tool, so I knew that it was possible. So one thing my goal that I set out when trying to do this was obviously to create a tool that can screenshot a variety of URLs. I wanted it to generate a report. I wanted to actually try to identify default creds of web applications. So a web app has or a printer has like a password admin by default. I wanted to have the tool actually give that to me in the report, so I don't waste my time actually having to look that up for that printer or for each respective application. And And finally, I kind of wanted a challenge. I wanted to try to figure out how to do this myself, and it was my challenge to do at the time. So at this point, again, I went straight to Google. I wanted to figure out how to take a screenshot of a web application in Python. One of the first things that it sent me to was, well, you know, Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow was talking about, hey, there's this awesome library called Ghost. Ghost makes it super easy, especially looking at this thing right here, where I can just import the library. I just give it like a timeout of like 4 seconds, let's say in this case. And I tell it, hey, go to this website. So in this case, it's Google, and then capture that image of that website. To me, that was super easy and exactly what I wanted for something when I was first trying to get into Foray, something a little bit more complex. So I checked out Ghost's website, and they have a lot of great like example code out there that I can look at, and I figured out that they have exactly what this was, the capturecube function right in it, where all you do is once it's actually gone to a website, you do capturecube and it'll save it off. So my next step is creating my proof of concept. I needed to know that this actually worked. And so that's exactly what I'm doing right here, is where I'm importing Ghost. I'm just giving myself some debug information to make sure I'm not failing on the import, saying, hey, I'm trying to actually screenshot a website. I've hard-coded in a URL, which no one can really see right down here. But it's I'm going to Google, and then I'm trying to actually then capture that website and make sure that it works. So here I am running it. It's going to the screenshot Google, so I know it got there. I know the screenshot captured, so it got to the end of my script, so I need to know if it actually works. And what do you know on my computer system is this screenshot of Google right now. So it's awesome. I have a really basic proof of concept that works, and I wanted to kind of expand upon that. So at this point, I need to figure out how can I actually expand upon this and make this easier to use. One of the easiest ways is probably file input. I don't want to have to hard code a website into my source code every single time. So I need to figure out how to give it files that contain URLs. So in this case, like a text file, which has every URL maybe on a new line, and then just goes through all of them. I wanted to figure out Nmap. So Nmap has this awesome ability to give out like XML code from its output. And if I can figure out how to parse that, then I can take that data and find all the web servers and have that automatically generate my URL list, basically. And that's awesome because I run Nmap on every single assessment. So that's going to already contain my data without me having to do anything else really. Nessus, also you can output a .nessus file, which is essentially just a giant XML file also. So you can basically take the same concepts of Nmap parsing, and I mean obviously you're tailored to Nessus, but you can do the same sort of thing. At this point, I hate XML parsing with all of my life. Like it is probably one of the worst things I've ever had to try to figure out. That guy back there, Tim, like had a great example code that I looked at and tried to figure out, and I was working on it with another guy, and it saves me a ton of time because it's not fun like, for me to figure out. Because every time I think I've got it, then I realize that it's like nested 2 more levels deep and everything's crashing. It really is annoying. So that actually really helped have me figure out. Testing file input is really interesting. So the first thing I want to do is, okay, I think I have this loop working. Now I want to give it like a file that contains a lot of URLs. So I was like, okay, where can I go to get this? Hey, they have this awesome website, like the top 1,000,000 websites. So I went out there, downloaded this. It was like a CSV, quickly parsed that real quick and got all the URLs. What type of websites do people think are among the most heavily trafficked on the internet? Yes. Doing that at work is not a good idea. I don't recommend sending your tools to porn sites while you're at work. Somehow, I didn't get in trouble, but it was interesting. So, yeah. So that was some basic improvements that I wanted to add to this tool, but I also wanted to figure out a couple other things, okay? So I had this suggestion where I can do some basic port scheming, where, again, Nmap does this 1,000,000 times better than I would ever try to hope to do. But if there's a quick and easy way to check if like 80 and 443 is open, then hey, let's add that in, and then I can use that if I need to. I want to do the report generation still. I still needed to add signatures for default threads. And I was actually given a suggestion for user agent switching, which I hadn't initially thought of. It was an awesome idea. I thought. So, like in this case, Ghost, I believe I have it configured right now to set up. It impersonates an Internet Explorer browser. However, what it was suggested, what happens if you tell it, or what happens if someone goes to it with like Chrome or something? Does the web page change at all? Like, does it change in any way? So there's a really interesting idea. I figured out how, or was going to look into, how to impersonate different browsers and then perform a comparison of all the results of like the pictures and the source code that came back. And I can know if this website actually changes per the browser you're using for it. And you can actually expand upon this. So you're not just like website or computer browsers, but you can compare like wget. You can compare browsers of like your vulnerability scanners and see if those are coming back with anything different. And so that was something that I started working on and added into the tool. So the report generation, I just wanted something really simple. I didn't want anything crazy. This is very similar, basically exactly the same as Peeping Tom back there. I just wanted to get something out. And so I basically created an HTML table, which just has like server header information and then, let's say, was it the credentials that a person may be there for that website, and then like a screenshot. The other thing that I thought was important was I wanted multi-page reports. So one thing that sucks is if you give Eyewitness initially like 1,000 URLs, you try to put 1,000 screenshots and information on a single page. It takes forever, it crashes browsers, I got yelled at. So I eventually figured out that I needed to create multi-page reports and add that. So some basic Eyewitness stats that I had was originally the very rough proof of concept with a lot of the different features that I talked about, came out to about right about 409 lines. Right now it's actually, I think, 1,762. So some of the reasons for this were, like, again, I wanted to add some of the port scanning. When I specify the directory that the results go into, different logging signatures. Who was the best guess of the real reason why I actually did this? Why it got so much bigger? Yes. Comments. Yes, comments and errors from users. Oops, that's the right way. Comments, trying to get stuff out and document it, and then error checking. That's right. There you go. It sucks. Actually, if you want to come on up here, thank you. For I have a southern or southern lockpick kit for you. So,
Yeah, thanks, yeah.
So error checking, like I talked about earlier, was one of the main reasons, in addition to commenting and trying to figure out how to actually document what I'm doing, that made this code so expanded. I needed to check what they were doing, what they were providing to me, and then if it actually caused my stuff to crash or not. So finally, I think for probably your most complex scripts and tools you're going to work on, you want to find something that you're really interested in, really passionate. And that's actually what I was lucky enough to do recently, where I tried to find my true call. The Veil framework. For us, we run assessments all the time. I'm sure many different pen testers or people out there have encountered the same thing, that antivirus sucks. It doesn't catch malware. Malware is always still getting around everywhere. People are still breaking in through it. But it does catch pen testers. It's ridiculous. It doesn't help at all with us. So we need to try to figure out a way, how can we get around antivirus solutions out there, as many as we can, as easily as professional malware authors. And what ended up being the solution was a Python-based framework that we use that generates payloads that can either inject shellcode into memory or act as like an interpreter stage your own box. So at this point, I was in way over my head. I knew that what I was going to be trying to do was going to be fairly complex, and I could get some of it, but I knew the concept of doing everything was going to be beyond me. So I actually had the opportunity to team up with Will right there and another guy that I work with, called Mike Wright, who also goes by my student. Some of the important things that we discovered when teaming up is that version control is going to be really important, because all three of us are going to be working on this code base at different times in different areas. We need to have a central area to manage everything. So we needed to know how to make sure we don't overwrite everything. We're using Git, again, whatever works for everyone else, whatever, make it work. but do it. Another big thing that we had to prepare, and that I will state, is when working on a project in a team, prepare for directional differences. People were going to want to have different goals, and this is something that you need to figure out. Like, everyone needs to sit down and actually talk about what it is that they want to do, what it is they want to write, and what goals they want to make sure that they achieve. So at this point, Mike and I had started looking into doing antivirus evasion as like real low level like assembly sort of work, and we had limited success, but it wasn't perfect. It didn't work constantly all the time. And we were nudged by Will, hey, maybe we should look into a different area. Like, instead of trying to work that low level, why not figure out like how to just execute shellcode in like different languages, like Python. So it was the first thing we did. Hey, let's check out Google. Google actually says, I Google search for how to execute shellcode with Python, and there's this awesome blog post right here. I went to that. I didn't take a screenshot of it because it's been way too tiny to show up on this in the slide deck, but you can do that search, the same blog post will come up. It's literally a proof of concept code on how to execute shellcode in Python. It's completely written out, and you can just copy and paste your shellcode right in and replace what he has in there, and it does it. So it'll run everything, and the funny thing is, it works. It bypasses antivirus. Like, this simple thing, just as changing the language that you're doing something to Python, worked. And we bypassed MSE, we bypassed like McAfee, like Symantec. I mean, I can't remember what else. But there's a ton that actually showed us, hey, this actually might work right now. So we had a really rough proof of concept of what we wanted the final like output to be of our payload. So what was next? We wanted to research different obfuscation techniques that we can actually use to try to hide our shellcode. And some of the ways that you can do this is, hey, check out like existing malware. Like, what are these guys trying to do? Are they trying to encrypt their stuff? Are they trying to like just change something around? And we can also do some research on like encryption routines that are available like in Python. So in Python, it's fairly simple to AES encrypt stuff. So hey, maybe we can hide some of our shellcode or the meat of the code, and that'll help bypass like superficial detection of our payload. We wanted to figure out how to generate files off of a template. Now, at this point, we also obviously knew that we couldn't create it too templatized. I don't know if that's a real word. Because if it was too much based off of the template, that's something that obviously people are, and AV vendors, going to be able to detect off of. So we didn't want that. And we realized, I was basically told, hey, a framework is probably going to really help make this easy at this point. Finally, we also wanted to automate as much of this process as possible. And I probably should really use a framework. So what did I do? We released 1.0, and it wasn't a framework. It was a single small script that had a limited amount of payloads, but they worked. And it worked probably better than it should have, because the stuff that we were doing was super basic and simple. It, again, was just either having the raw shellcode in the file or just like AES encrypting the shellcode. So at this point, we need to figure out how can we actually improve upon this and make this better. The first thing that we realized, we didn't want to make this a single script. Maintaining a single script across everyone can be a pain, and it's not extensible like at all. It's just a giant pain to have to work with. And so again, we're like, hey, a framework might be really nice. And at this point, like, Will really kind of acted as my mentor, because I was still learning Python at this point. I probably had been using Python and like trying to write in it for about like 6 months, maybe a little less than a year, and I was still learning. This guy has a lot of time, like development knowledge that I didn't have. And so he really acted as like my mentor and helped make writing stuff significantly easier. And that's something that I highly recommend everyone do for writing a complex tool, is find a mentor. Like, having someone to bounce ideas off of is invaluable. Like, you're going to learn a lot from another individual. If it is only in how they approach the problem or whatever it is you're trying to do, like, they're going to see it in a different way, which is easy to look at. So at this point, this guy didn't sleep. Mike and I had our own code. He had another code base where he was doing everything he was nudging us to tell us to do. He combined both of our code bases into a single framework over a week. It was incredible. I don't know how he did it that fast, but he figured it out. I took this as an opportunity to try to learn from existing code, and by that, was really looking at the results of his output and trying to understand how frameworks are made and look at it and figure it out. And so that came out with then we had Veil 2.0, which this was June 17th. This was actually released. Some of the main things that were huge with us when we did this was Veil was actually a modular framework at this point. It wasn't a single script. You can actually drag and drop your payloads into certain directories. So let's say you create your own payload, you can just drop it into our folders, and it will get picked up by the framework automatically. It's language agnostic, so it wasn't specific to just Python. We could do stuff in PowerShell, C#, C, etc. Check out actually his talk later today because he's going to go over some of the stuff that we figured out on like how to hide and evade a lot of the different things that we were looking at, that we were coming across in our evasion capabilities when we were testing and trying to figure out. Veil was also now easily extensible because it was something that we created functions and libraries that other payloads could actually use within the framework. And then we had big UI components where we tried to make it usable through tab completion, command line flags, etc. So at this point, it was interesting because I learned a lot from existing code, and that existing code was basically, again, the framework that was created. You're going to learn a lot from having to figure out how to develop as a team, and you learn proper version control. Don't delete branches. Trust me, don't do it. So the Veil framework ended up, Veil was actually renamed to Veil Evasion because we moved more toward a framework that we were trying to create where it associates a large variety of tools that are in it. So again, what we're trying to achieve now is we're trying to take pen testing tools and try to bridge the gap between red team capabilities, what they have, try to meet somewhere in the middle or get close to it. Within Veil Evasion, or the Veil framework, we have Catapult, which has since been deprecated, but was our payload delivery tool. Veil PowerView, which is a PowerShell network situational awareness tool, and then Pillage, which was actually just released by Will at DEF CON last year, which has a whole talk in of itself. Like, I'm not even going to give it justice by trying to talk about it now, but it's a modular post-exploitation framework that you can actually use. And so the state of the Veil Evasion right now is it's still maintained. This is the final thing that I've been talking about, is you want to maintain your project. We still do it. We have what we call V-Day, where the 15th of every month we release a different payload. It's our victory over antivirus, because antivirus is terrible. We always extend the framework by adding a new payload, giving it a different capability. Something always comes out on the 15th of every month. And we're still hoping for community involvement in it. So if anyone wants to submit a payload, you will actually be the first person from the community to add something to the Veil Evasion code base. So hint, hint, you're looking for something. That's kind of the end of it. It really helped me get into development by trying to figure out something that I'm passionate in and that I'm interested in. It made life a lot easier because I was actually interested in it versus being told to do it. You want to start small and finish it because starting small, you're going to get those quick wins of actually having finished your script or your tool. Make it usable and stable. Again, the death of your project is going to be it crashes all the time when people need to use it. And finally, maintain it. Enjoy doing it. Like, you're going to deal with users, but you're also going to learn a lot and add some new features that you never would have thought about because your users out there. If you have any questions, you can hit me up on Twitter. A lot of the scripts I have, that I kind of went over, are on my GitHub, which is right there. You can always shoot me an email. And for anything, questions, Veil framework related, you can just check out our website and hit any of us up. That's about it. Thanks a lot.